Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Holland Land Office Museum for our guest speaker series. This is a program we do 2 to 3 times a month, and it being October, we've got some really good topics this month. Thank you to Tompkins Community Bank and Xavier Rotary Club for helping to sponsor this program. We're very happy to have Dr. Elizabeth Masarik from SUNY Brockport here today, who has actually written a couple publications that we have on display up front there. But what she'll be talking about today is Spiritualism's Place. She's also one of the producers of the award-winning podcast. I think she should say award-winning. Dig History, so if you haven't checked that out, be sure to. There's some really interesting topics on there. I've sampled some things, so I'm catching up. Dr. Masarik?
All right. Thank you. This is awesome. I love a full crowd. I was like, is there anybody there today? So I'm glad you're here. All right, let's see. Is this on? I don't know if it's on.
I can hear you.
Yeah. I don't. I think do you want it piped through there though?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
There. All right. Okay. Oh, it is. Okay, great. So hi everybody. I'm Elizabeth Garner-Masarik. I am an assistant professor at Brockport University. I just turned in my tenure packet, so hopefully it'll be updated next time I come here. So yay! So I'm here to talk to you about spiritualism, particularly spiritualism in Western New York and spiritualism at Lilydale, New York. Me and some of my co-hosts for Dig History podcast put this book together, and unfortunately there's only one left. Had I known, I would have brought more, but Spiritualism's Place, and it is about Lilydale, New York. So before we really dive in, I would like everybody to just imagine yourself. You're in Rochester, New York. It's 1866. You've walked into the Unitarian Church in Rochester. Kind of looks like this room, a little bit bigger, a little bit darker. No electricity. You know, we've got candles in the wall sconces. And you are excited. You're a bit nervous because you are there to hear a trance medium, woman who apparently can speak with the dead. Here is how a Rochester, New York newspaper described the event you are at. On the evening appointed, a large and intelligent audience, that is you, assembled at the Unitarian Church to hear and see Mrs. Watson. At the appointed hour, she was seen sitting in one of the clerical seats upon the platform, and amid the silence that pervaded the house, she arose and moved towards the desk, and with a low voice briefly addressed the audience, apologizing for her infirm state of health and expressing her regret that she might fail to meet their expectation, unable as she always was to speak in public, except as a medium in a trance state. She hoped, however, that you might not be entirely disappointed. With a wave of her hand to the organist, she took her seat. Sweetly from the instrument issued the notes of Home Sweet Home. And while the dulcet tones with the lowest, softest touch rolled through the small aisles, every gaze was turned upon the speaker, who with uplifted hands and eyes showed many symptoms of nervous agitation. Not very pleasant to behold, but intensely interesting to those who came there to scrutinize every movement and watch every look of her who was to address them. Some painful contortions and twitchings were discernible for a few minutes, with hard and seemingly very labored breathing, and then the music ceased, and she arose, and moved slowly and with closed eyes towards the desk. Placing her arms upon the cushion, she raised her hands towards heaven and craved in few words holy guidance to utter good only and not a word of evil. And then stepping back again, she began her discourse. Her physical appearance was that of a sleeping person, though at the onset there seemed to pervade her frame an unnatural strength and power that continued during the whole lecture. Her head was thrown way back, and her fine symmetrical form was never exhibited to better advantage. She was tastefully dressed, and she looked a queen, at least before she spoke, like some royal statue standing with closed eyes in deep reverie. Her first utterance came with a surprise, as the tone and volume were changed from hesitation and feebleness to energetic and loud articulation. Every word spoken was distinct and clear, and every movement easy and appropriate. All was readily heard and understood. During the hour and a half, Mrs. Watson chained the audience with her words. And she chained the audience with her action in a most masterly manner, sometimes becoming very animated and frequently bursting out in strains of surprising eloquence, gesturing very gracefully and often with wonderful earnestness and force, always commanding the most profound attention and silence, and many times creating a plainly perceptible sensation, which manifested by deep feeling and sympathy depicted upon the countenances of her hearers. They felt it. You felt it. This author in the Rochester newspaper goes on to say how eloquently and expertly Mrs. E.L. Watson channeled spirit to that assembled crowd. He goes on to wonder, how can we explain this mystery? How is what we are seeing on this stage real? How does this happen? That a demure, timid woman could transform before our very eyes into a booming orator. This particular author is sure that he has experienced a miracle. So the scene that we have all just experienced was a trance medium reading by Elizabeth Lowe Watson. Her ability to channel the spirit world was noteworthy, yes, but it was not completely out of the ordinary, because Mrs. Watson was part of a phenomenon called spiritualism that really took the world, particularly the Western world, by storm in the 19th century. So, this is me and my co-hosts. We write Dig, a history podcast. We all have kind of different areas of expertise. Myself and Sarah, we are both the American historians. I particularly work in the late 19th, early 20th century. Other of my co-hosts are world historians. We've been doing this podcast since 2017. Before that, we actually started another podcast in 2015 called History Buffs, because we were out of the University of Buffalo. And in 2018, Cornell University Press actually approached us, and they asked if we would like to do something kind of, irregular. Usually a book is turned into a podcast, right? This way, they were like, hey, would you like to turn a podcast into a book? And we're like, oh, how does that work? Let's figure that out. So after kind of some trial and error, some talking about it, we thought, you know what? Lilydale, New York, that would be perfect. Two of us, Sarah and Marissa, are from Western New York. They grew up going to Lilydale. Both of them went there in different capacities. Sarah lost a very close family member and when she was a teenager, and so her family started going to Lilydale Her mother converted to spiritualism, so she was very intimately involved. Marissa, in other ways, was very intimately involved. Myself, I'm from Texas. I had never heard of Lilydale, New York. However, I was familiar with spiritualism. And same with Abel. She was from Vermont. But it was kind of my time period. So, you know, it took us about 10 years to put this book together, going to Lilydale, staying, summers, working through the archives, working very closely with Ron Nagay, who was the historian at Lilydale, and some other, kind of integral members of Lilydale, kind of allowing us to access their records and things like that. And so we put together this book kind of as a homage, so to speak, to Lilydale, because it's a really magical place, and I see a lot of head nodding, so if you've been there, I think you know the vibe I'm talking about. You just kind of go there and you feel it, right? So this is a little bit about that book that we were able to put together. And so Lilydale, New York, if you haven't been to Lilydale, it was actually founded in 1879. In Chautauqua County, and I'll talk a little bit about why that date's important in a bit, because it's actually viewed as kind of the end, so to speak, of the phenomenon that is spiritualism. So spiritualism, normally as like a kind of a sensation, is really thought about more happening in the 1850s, 1860s, like when Elizabeth Lo Watson was speaking in Rochester. Now, obviously, it doesn't go away, right? We've got spiritualists in this room today, but the kind of phenomena, so to speak, really begins to kind of taper off in the 1870s. So it's very interesting that one of the longest kind of standing meccas, so to speak, for spiritualism is actually founded kind of at the end of that in 1879. How many of you have been to Lilydale?
Yeah,
Good amount of you. All right.
I haven't yet, but I'd like to be there.
It's a great place. So, kind of moving backwards, why spiritualism and why Western New York? Why this area? 1820s to 1840s, there's this phenomenon going on. It's called the Market Revolution. You've got the Erie Canal, right? That is changing time, space, and place for a lot of people. Travel and shipping that used to take months now takes days, right? You have the advent of railroad, steam engines, right? Now steam ships can be going upriver instead of only down. You have this steam engine is also helping propel the newspaper industry, because now instead of hand typing everything or hand pressing everything, you've got a machine that can churn it out. Coupled with this transportation, this cut in transportation, means that more and more people are getting more and more newspapers, right? So at this point in time, 1820s to 1840s, people are really kind of experiencing a magical time of technology. And their conception of time and space is shortening and changing, right? And I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. But the other thing that is going on at this time is something called the Second Great Awakening. And it is a nationwide phenomenon of a kind of rise of Protestant evangelical Christianity. So it's happening a lot up and down kind of the eastern seaboard, but it's particularly taking hold here in Western New York, right? One of the reasons it's taking hold here is because what travels along right here? Huh?
Yeah.
The Erie Canal, right? Erie Canal, finished in 1825, makes travel up and down, throughout New York State even easier. So there's already this kind of higher interest in religion going on, coupled with this, really kind of great transportation phenomena going on, right? So the Second Great Awakening is particularly one of the kind of main people that we talk about when we're talking about the Second Great Awakening is a man by the name of Charles G. Finney. He is from Adams, New York. He's a lawyer. He is having kind of midlife crisis, existential crisis, doing that thing a lot of us do, like what is it all about? What am I doing, right? He, begins to pray. He goes out into the woods, and he has a vision, right? He has kind of a religious experience. After that experience, he enters Presbyterian seminary to become a preacher. When he gets out of that, he is funded by the Women's Missionary Society, which is out of Utica, New York. They basically fund him to spread the good word, right? Because one thing that is happening with the advent of the Erie Canal and with the advent of easy transportation is there are a lot of people coming into Western New York, particularly men, young men, that are working on the canal. Many of them are unmoored, they don't have families, they're hard drinkers, and so there is this kind of fear, so to speak, that this area is just a rough and tumble frontier, right? That there's too much drinking, there's too much carousing, there's too much sex work going on in big cities like Rochester. And we need to send missionaries there to kind of direct that energy, so to speak, right? So the Western New York, up and down the Erie Canal, gets a kind of overflow, so to speak, of a lot of these preachers that are funded by different missionary societies to go and spread the good word and kind of Christianize this frontier, right? So Finney is one of those individuals. They are referred to as itinerant preachers, meaning they don't have a particular home church, right? They're just kind of traveling. They're going from town to town. They're Spencerport, and then Freeport, and then to Brockport, right? And then they're hitting Batavia, right? And they're hitting all the ports, right? And they're spreading the news, spreading the word, right? It is estimated that during Finney's kind of travel through this area, he converted about 3,000 people, which is a lot, particularly when you're thinking about, there wasn't that many people here at the time, right? He makes his home base in Rochester, right? So Rochester becoming one of the kind of, pillars, thank you, pillars of this particular reform movement area that's going on at this time. Finney is one of the most famous preachers in the United States, right? So it's not just a localized thing. And the fact that he is in Rochester, where a lot of other kind of big names end up going, like Frederick Douglass, Susan B. Anthony, right? It just kind of shows the importance of Rochester to this movement. Some other, let's see, I don't remember what slides I have here. Yeah, but there are a lot of people that are interested in experimenting with Protestant religion. You have a lot of people coming to the area that are transplants out of New England. A lot of Vermonters are coming here, but also people from like Connecticut, New Hampshire. These are like second and third sons that maybe the family farm can't be split up anymore, and so they're moving out west. This was considered the West, right? They're moving west to start anew, and those individuals, their families had already experienced the First Great Awakening, where there's this kind of break away from the Calvinist church. So these people are already kind of primed to be a bit more experiential or experimental with their Christianity, right? And so this area of Western New York is just kind of a fertile ground for experimenting with religions. So obviously one of the famous ones that come out of this is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormons, right? Joseph Smith, very much like Finney, goes out into the woods. He has a religious experience, right? He is visited by the angel Moroni, which tells him that there are golden plates hidden in the hills near Palmyra, New York, that have the word of God on them, right? He goes out into the hills. He uses divining stones, right? Kind of, again, understanding this folk religion that is being used at the time to find these plates. Long story short, him and his wife transcribe them. They go missing. Moroni is very angry. He transcribes them again. They end up becoming the Book of Mormon, right? his ideas are Protestant adjacent, right? But he does have some kind of views that his neighbors do not like, particularly that the Mormons should create a new Jerusalem, and to do this, strong patriarchs need many wives to populate this, right? So they're practicing polygamy. They get run out of Palmyra, they head to Ohio, then they're pushed to Illinois, and eventually they make their way out to Utah, right? But it started here, right? It has started here at that point in time that we are talking about this Second Great Awakening. Another one is the Millerites. William Miller, another transplant to Western New York. He begins reading the Bible very closely. He determines that the second coming of Christ is going to happen sometime between March of 1843 and March of 1844. So he begins to travel, up and down all those little towns around the Erie Canal, that area that I showed you on the map previously, getting converts. People are like, oh, this guy's onto something, right? So he starts to make a following. Unfortunately, no Jesus by 1843. They're like, no, wait. Okay, it's fine. It's October 22nd, 1843, right? So then more and more people get excited. Many of the people actually start kind of getting rid of their worldly possessions in getting ready for this October 22nd, 1844. Spoiler alert, there is no Jesus. Obviously, a lot of the Millerites kind of fade away. They're like, okay, well, this is not working. Let's go look at some others. But there are some, true believers, and they end up becoming the modern-day Adventists. So particularly the Seventh-day Adventists, right? So again, another religion that comes out of this area that is still, fairly going strong today. There's a Seventh-day Adventist church around the house around the corner from my house in Austin, Texas, growing up, right? So they're all over. They're not just in Western New York. So this is the region, right? This is the fertile crucible that creates or is open to spiritualism, right? Many of you perhaps are familiar with the story, but just in case you are not. So Kate and Maggie Fox were living with their parents in a little cottage in Hydesville, New York. Again, same region, not far from Rochester, not far from the canal, right? They're preteen girls. They're, very young. They begin to hear some rappings, in the walls and ceilings and baseboards in their house. After experimenting with these noises for a while, they begin to determine that they can talk to them. They can ask these noises questions and get some answers. They develop kind of a rudimentary alphabet with these sounds. You can imagine their mother is not very pleased about this. They're freaking their mom out a little bit. Mom goes to the neighbors, come here, listen to what the girls are doing this time, right? Please come and listen. And the neighbor's like, oh, no, there's something going on here. There's something going on here. So their older sister, Leah, who is living in Rochester at the time, basically they go into Rochester. They're two very important people that are part of the abolitionist movement, part of this new reform movement, part of the women's rights movement. Amy and Isaac Post were very serious people in Rochester. They go, they hear the girls, and they're like, yeah, there's something here, right? There's something going on. So the kind of support of people like the Posts, right, makes something that is happening with some preteen girls, which, let's be frank, in 1848 are not listened to, right? Preteen girls are not telling people what to do in 1848. They're not telling people to do now, usually either, right?
Yeah, I think they are.
And yeah, I think they are, right? So yeah, something's going on, right? And so they kind of become the celebrities of Rochester. They end up doing kind of a test mediumship in Corinthian Hall in Rochester, New York. If you are familiar at all with Frederick Douglass, his most famous speech is what is the 4th of July to the slave, or excuse me, what to the slave is the 4th of July. He gives that speech in Corinthian Hall. right? Like this is a major event, this is not just some back alley place, right? Like they are in downtown Rochester, like to a very serious audience, right? So of course, with newspapers being the way they are and news spreading faster than it ever had before, this gets picked up, right? And it flashes this phenomenon, right? It starts this phenomenon. And all of a sudden, you begin to have many, particularly young girls, there are some men as well, that begin to be able to channel spirit, be able to become a spirit medium. Now, this shouldn't really seem that strange, because one of the other technological advances of this time is the telegraph. It's just in 1843 that Congress even lays the first telegraph line. What does telegraph go by? Or what is the code? Morse code, right? Right? So there's a few things going on. I'm not necessarily implying that they are copying Morse code. What I am implying is I've said this a few times, but people's conception of time and space are changing, right? Say if you're living in Batavia and you've got a cousin in Albany, it might take you a month to get a letter to that person. Now all of a sudden, through some wires in the sky, you can get a message from your cousin in a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
That's magic, right? That like literally seems like magic. So if I can talk to my cousin in Albany through some taps and wires in the sky, why can I not talk to my deceased mother? Why can I not reach the other side, right? So whether you're a believer or not, at this time, it does not seem that outside of the normal, because people are experiencing things that they never thought they would be able to experience before, right? So that is one reason why this explodes the way it does, right? Because people are definitely interested in testing the bounds of science, right? And testing the bounds of, boundaries that we thought we previously had are just being blown away. So what other boundaries, right? The boundary between the veil, so to speak, why can't we not blow that away through science as well, right? So that is what is kind of fueling all of this and makes it seem legitimate to people who normally would not feel that it was legitimate, okay? All right, so where are we? Now, what's going on in the 19th century also that would make people want to speak to the dead? Obviously, it's a human condition, right? We are asking all the time, where do we go when the lights go out? What happens to us when we die? I mean, that's just human questions, right? That we've all had since we started making fire, right? But the 19th century is a pretty dangerous place. And actually, the 19th century is more deadly than the 18th century was in the United States, if you can believe it. Actually, life expectancy went down. We actually got shorter in the 19th century because nutrition was lacking. People are now living in cities and more kind of crowded cities, and so cholera and malaria and these kind of deadly tuberculosis, right? These kind of deadly diseases are spreading through populations faster. And so, of course, one of the reasons that our life expectancy did go down in the 19th century is because of childhood mortality, right? And so it was not an unordinary thing for a family to have experienced the loss of a child, right? That was a pretty normal experience for any, birthing age woman, right? And if she did not experience it, her sister did, or her cousin did, or her neighbor did, right? Like it was something that was kind of just part and parcel of being a person living in the 19th century. You also have the rise of a consumer culture, particularly magazines like the Delineator, Gotti's Ladies Book, that are putting fashion plates in there, basically showing you what the Paris Fashion Week was showing, what you should be wearing this season. And in those fashion magazines were also mourning attire. This is what you should be wearing to mourn properly, to be a proper woman. This is how long you should wear it. You should be wearing black and flattened jet jewelry, and then after a certain amount of time, you can start going to the mauves and the grays and the lavenders, right? And there's this whole procession. Well, somebody's making money off of that as well, right? So it's being marketed as something that if you are a proper woman and a good woman, you should do, right? So there is this, mourning culture kind of infused within what I call actually in that brown book over there, the culture of sentiment that is going on in the 19th century, where it's part and parcel of just being a proper person, right? This is how you mourn, and if you're mourning, you can go down to a spirit medium, right? Or you could purchase mortuary photography, things like that, right? Things that you couldn't do beforehand. So again, all things that are making the phenomena of spiritualism bigger, more popular, and why it's spreading so much, right? Seances, right, became part of this cultural phenomenon. Everybody is doing them. Some people are doing them to scientifically, as much as they can, test the mediums, right? They're really trying to see, they're skeptics, right? But like scientific skeptics, they want to test it as scientifically as they possibly can. Is this really happening? Let's keep her hands and arms and legs and vision, and we can see while we're hearing the noises, right? So some people are testing mediums. Some people are there in mourning, right, and are just desperate to speak with their loved ones, no matter, how. And some people are doing it just for fun, right? Again, it is something that people are just doing, right? And just like any kind of phenomena that is happening today, people come with it to it with different reasonings of why they are participating in something. To show you that this is not just some flash in the pan, this is my slide that I call all the spiritualists, right? One that is particularly interesting to me. So Marianne McClintock, this is her table. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Marianne McClintock wrote the Declaration of Sentiments on this table in Seneca Falls in 1848, leading up to the Seneca Falls Women's Rights Convention, right? This table was used for seances, right? This was in Anne McClintock's home, Mary Ann McClintock's home. She had used it for seances, right? It's the same table that is used for seances is also used to write the Declaration of Sentiments. Eleanor Babcock, who's from Fredonia, she's the press secretary for NASA, the National American Women's Suffrage Association. That's the major suffrage association that forms in 1890. She's their press secretary. Serious person, right? Also a spiritualist. Sojourner Truth, spiritualist, right? She's actually a spiritualist preacher. Harriet Jacobs, she wrote Instances in the Life of a Slave Girl. It's one of the more famous kind of slave narratives. It's the one where she actually has to hide in the attic for like 7 years, if that rings any bells for you. She's a spiritualist, right? And then Arthur Conan Doyle, the writer of Sherlock Holmes, right? A spiritualist. Again, so serious people, right? Lots of people that are spiritualists. Now, why women? It's the 19th century. You definitely have a separation of the sexes. We like to frame that as kind of separate spheres, right? Men's world is supposed to be in the public. It's the political world. It's the wage labor world. And the women's sphere should be it's supposed to be in the home, where they are taking care of children and they are making a safe place for men who are in the rough and tumble public sphere to come into the private sphere, for respite, so to speak, right? Now, this is all an ideology, right? In actual fact, women, of course, are having to go out into the world, particularly women who are not wealthy enough to be able to only be in the home, right? It's all an ideology of the time. But it explains why women are viewed as being more susceptible to being open to spirit. Women are seen as softer, gentler, more fluid, more open to religion and to spirit, right? So they're not, hard and, right? They're soft, right? Well, of course, spirit can enter something that's soft, right? And so it makes sense that spirit, for the most part, is being channeled through women more than it is men. Now, this is a point in time where it is a big no-no for a lady to get up in front of an audience like this and speak, right? That just does not happen. When it does, it's in abolitionist meetings and people are getting, rotten tomatoes thrown at their head, or sometimes the building they're talking to is literally burned down, right? It's not a safe place to be, right? It's also not a proper thing to do because they're speaking in what they call the promiscuous audience, meaning male and female together, right? It's fine for a woman to stand up in front of a ladies' meeting, right? But a promiscuous audience with men and women, that's a no-no, right? But all of a sudden, you have these women who normally would not be allowed or accepted or even want to speak in front of an audience are now going in front of large audiences, channeling spirit. A couple things going on there. It's a bit more acceptable because it's understood that it's not the woman who is talking, right? It's spirit talking through her, right? But over the century, that kind of begins to morph and change, right? Other things are going on politically, right? The women's rights movement is getting bigger and louder, and so women are speaking more in public than they were, right? But this is part of that transformation, that people are beginning to get accustomed to seeing women speaking in public as mediums, and it makes people, slowly over time a little more comfortable with seeing them speaking even when they're not mediums. What else does this do? This starts to turn kind of patriarchy on its head, particularly that kind of male-focused hierarchy that's going on in the church, right? In many denominations, women are not allowed to preach, right? Men are allowed to go to seminary to learn to be the educated person who can decipher, Christ's word to the congregation, right? Well, now a woman can tap the divine. Like, we don't need this guy, right? So it starts to shake things up a little bit, and it's very spiritualism is very intriguing for people who are already questioning, or people who weren't questioning now begin to question, right? And so many adherents that began to follow spiritualism by default are abolitionists, because why would man be able to control other men, right? That's only for the divine. Only the divine can tell us that. And then, of course, taking it a step further, why would men be able to control women, right? Because during this time, women basically become civilly dead when they get married, right? It's this thing called coverture. They marry, they lose their name, they lose their right to sign contracts. They lose their right to any inheritance that they brought to the marriage. If there's a divorce or something like that, they don't get custody of the children. They have no say over that whatsoever. They're not allowed to own property, right? And so it's not slavery. I want to make sure that we understand that, right? But these women are also saying, you know what, our status is not where we want it to be either, right? And so somebody like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who was part of that Seneca Falls and that early women's rights movement, right? It's not just about the vote, right? Elizabeth Cady Stanton actually spends a lot of her time working on women's property rights here in New York, right? So it's little steps like that that are kind of happening through the 19th century. So one of these, young girls around 1848, when the Fox sisters are becoming kind of celebrities, and all of these young girls begin to be able to talk to spirit. One of those young girls is Elizabeth Little Watson. So at the age of 7, she actually begins to hear spirit. She's in her schoolhouse, and she's actually able to talk in front of the kids in her schoolhouse. It's like hitting the heater, in the middle of the room, right? And so, again, with the wrappings, right? She is this Wonderful story. I love this one. So she ends up marrying Jonathan Watson, who was also a spiritualist. And Spirit tells him where he should be digging his oil wells. So he actually becomes a millionaire in Titusville, Pennsylvania, because Spirit has told him where to dig his oil wells. He becomes rich. They're millionaires. They go to Rochester and build a mansion on Millionaires Row. She's rubbing elbows with Susan B. Anthony and Amy and Isaac Post, and is just part of kind of the creme de la creme of Rochester, right? She's also a spiritualist, right? So 1866, so that's 4 years after she marries Jonathan Watson. 1866 is when she gave that reading in Corinthian Hall, right? So like it's no secret, right? She's a married woman. But yeah, she's also a pretty famous medium, right? She ends up leaving Jonathan. I think he was not nice to her. I don't have the smoking gun, so to speak, of why she left, but she ends up running away from him. She moves to California in 1878. She starts a whole kind of movement there. But she's also a founder of Lilydale. So she's in California in 1878. They call her back. They say, we're founding Lilydale, 1879. We need you here. So she's one of the first speakers in Lilydale, New York, 1879. I know she's not known there very much. So I'm giving her a book. I'm going to write her a book because she needs to be known, right?
Yeah.
But in California, so this is Metropolitan Temple. It burned down in the 1906 fire, unfortunately, in San Francisco. But she's speaking at places like this. She becomes the president of the Women's Equal Suffrage Association in California and is president of that suffrage association in 1911 when California grants women the right to vote. But you've never heard of this woman, right? No. Yeah, she is this, at the time, very famous spiritualist medium and is this major suffragist, right? Yeah, so that is one thing, right, that spiritualism allows, right? It allows women to hold positions of authority, right, in civil society and within the religion as a whole. Another very famous medium from the time is Cora L.V. Richmond. She was also started hearing spirit when she was a young woman in kind of the burned over Western New York district. She's another person who, is very frequently at Lilydale in its early days. And this is her at the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago. Anybody read Devil in the White City? That's a great book if you haven't read it, right? But it's like the World's Fair during this time. Like, if you're reading any kind of history of like the late 19th century Gilded Age, something is going on at this Chicago's World's Fair, right? Like anybody who's anybody is at that World's Fair, right? And so she is there, the only woman in this parliament of religions that is representing the religion, and she's there to represent spiritualism in this parliament of religions, right? And then, of course, the women's rights movement. So here, this is a picture from Lilydale, New York. It's taken in 1893. Here in the middle, holding the flag, you have Marion Skidmore. Again, one of the founders of Lilydale. She's holding a flag with two stars. One says Wyoming, one says Colorado. These, at that time, are the two states that allow women's suffrage. Wyoming allowed women's suffrage when it came in as a state from a territory. Colorado had just voted to change their constitution to allow women to vote. So I want you to kind of think about that for a second, because basically suffragists, men and women, had to convince the men of Colorado to meet, have a constitutional convention, and change their constitution. Right? Like that's a heavy lift, right? When you think about all of these states changing their constitution, they basically have to convince the men, who are the only ones that can vote on this, to change their constitution to allow women to vote, right? So she's holding this up, like, look, it's a hard-won, victory, but we've got a long way to go. Right here, Susan B. Anthony, and she is there in Lilydale in 1893. Because in 1894, New York State is also going to have a constitutional convention. And so people like Susan B. Anthony are going all over the state to whoever and whenever will let her talk to try to get people on board for suffrage. But the thing is, this is not Susan B. Anthony's only time to be in Lilydale. She ends up going there practically every summer. So Lilydale has camp season, right? They're usually just there during the summertime. Susan B. Anthony is practically there every single summer until her death in 1906, right? So not every suffragist is a spiritualist. Susan B. Anthony was not a suffragist. She was a pragmatist. She would talk to whoever would listen. But every spiritualist is a suffragist. If that makes sense, right? So you have a lot of people in the women's rights movement who are going to Lilydale that are not spiritualists themselves, but they understand that this demographic is an important part of their movement, right? That this is a very strong group of people that are adamant about women's suffrage, that are adamant about women's rights, and are going to support them. And they're going to support them monetarily. Marion Skidmore, fairly wealthy woman. You can see in some of the records of like suffrage kind of money coming in, right? Like her and her husband are giving money. Abigail Pettengill, who's another one of the founders of Lilydale and ends up becoming the president of Lilydale. Very rich woman, also giving a lot of money to the suffrage cause, right? Let's see. So this is a picture of Reverend Anna Howard Shaw. And this is actually a picture that I found during research for this book. And this picture itself was on, now I can't remember. It was like a digital archive of Harvard. And they actually didn't even have it listed as being in Lilydale. They just have a picture of Anna Howard Shaw. But those of you who are familiar with Lilydale, what's the building behind there? The Maplewood Hotel, right? It's the Maplewood Hotel. They're just sitting out there in, kind of the open area, right? So Reverend Anna Howard Shaw, again, not a spiritualist, but very good friends with Abigail Pettengill and other spiritualists there. She also continues to go to Lilydale every summer, right? To talk about women's rights, but also because this is a group of friends that she's created, right? So these people, it's this network of women reformers that is very much integrated with the spiritualist movement, right? So there's another picture of the Maplewood Hotel there. Yeah. So as Lilydale grows, right, so again, let me just kind of back up a little bit, right? Lilydale becomes this place where they have what they call camp season. So every summer, people will go to Lilydale. Some people have permanent cottages there. Others will set up tents. It's part of a larger movement in the 19th century where kind of reform-minded, religious-minded people are building these camps, right? So Chautauqua Institute is another one that is being built around the same time. You have some in Onset, Massachusetts, on some lakes in Michigan, right? Like it's kind of thing. The Methodists for a long time had been big on these kind of camp meetings, creating these summer camp events. So it's not particular to Lilydale, but it's something that, middle class, fairly wealthy people who can leave the city for the summer and go and spend a summer with like-minded people where they're going to lyceums, right? They're going to talks on the most cutting-edge science and political ideas of the time, right? And so these are reform-minded, kind of educated people, right? So over the years, Lilydale, it really builds up. They end up having a bowling alley. They have a movie theater. This is, the swimming area. They have a little diving board there. Often they would have dances in the summertime, like on Saturday nights. They'd have actually a floating barge out in the lake, and they'd have a band out on this floating barge on the lake, and people would dance on the shore, right? So, I mean, if you're there, if you've been there recently, right, like a lot of that stuff is not there anymore, unfortunately. Lilydale had a lot of fires, as a lot of places do, right? Like things are built out of wood. So a lot of that stuff is gone, and a lot of that money has just kind of left the area. But for a very long time, well into mid-century, mid-20th century, it was a very thriving place, right? Not just in the summertime, but all of the time. So let's talk a bit about how spiritualism kind of changes, because I've talked a lot about the 19th century, like why was it such a phenomenon, how is it related to the women's rights movement, but there were elements of it that some people were really into, some people were not so into, right? So there is this thing called physical manifestation, right? So it moves beyond just a woman, you know, kind of speaking, or a medium, I shouldn't say a woman because there were men too, right? Of just speaking spirit through them, or, you know, getting messages through either smells or taste or hearing, but people actually manifesting. So this is table tipping, right? That's a very Victorian thing that you would see. You know, basically, spirit, are you here? If so, rattle the table, right? But of course, this opens up to a lot of fraud, right? Like it makes things easier to create, right? So if you've been to Disney World, right, or Disneyland and ridden the Haunted Mansion, Madame Leola, right, and this whole room that she's in, she's got the instruments that are floating around her. That is because in the Haunted Mansion, you are riding in your little dune buggy through a 19th century home, right? And so you go through the seance room, right? So here is a picture, you know, actually of the time, and you see this is like a little, it looks like a lyre, like a ukulele kind of guitar coming up, and so the music might be playing or something while you're in one of these seances. You could go to a place like Lilydale and have spirit photography done. So you would sit for a portrait, right? And you'd have your portrait taken, and then, you know, the next day or whatever, you can come back and you can pick up your portrait, and there would be these floating faces around you, right? And these would be your loved ones from beyond. Unfortunately, most people who went back to pick up their picture did not recognize any of the people who were floating around them. Here's some more spirit photography. Another phenomena is ectoplasm.
Yeah.
So having some kind of substance that might come out of the bodies of spirit mediums. Sometimes it's, you know, just a substance. Other times you might have little images of spirit that are within the ectoplasm. Obviously, these are taken with a flash photography, so to us it looks like that's cheesecloth. You're sitting in a very dark room. You're already kind of primed, right, to be there to experience something. Everybody around you is a little electric, and you're a little spooky, and you got the little tingles, right? And then something like this is happening, and you start to see something coming out of it, like, you know, this is interesting, right? Ectoplasm, where have we heard this word before? Yeah! Dan Aykroyd's grandfather was a spiritualist in Lilydale. So he grew up going to Lilydale, New York.
Cool.
You know, this is part of his family, right? So what does he do? I mean, he's one of the writers and co-producers of Ghostbusters, right? Well, there you go. Now, this is a spirit trumpet, right? So basically this would be used to be kind of like the larynx of spirit. So perhaps there's a couple different ways that it would be used. It might float around the room. That's very long. They're about like this big, and they're 10. They're very light. So they might float around the room. You might hear voices coming out of them, or music. You might also hold it up to your neck, and the voice of spirit would come through your neck. Now again, all of these things, especially that one, right? The credulous among us are like, what is going on, right? And so in 1949, Lilydale says no more physical mediums. because there are too many frauds, right? There are too many people that are coming and taking people's hard-earned money. And the thing is, we are serious spiritualists, right? We are serious mediums, and we don't want these charlatans here because we are a legitimate religion, right? And so we want to kick out these people who are giving spiritualism a bad name, right? So now, you will not see any of this physical mediumship in Lilydale, unless they're having like a special event. Like 2 summers ago, I was there and they were doing a table tipping ceremony, right? Ceremony is not the right word. Workshop, right? Kind of like showing you as a medium how you can do table tipping, right? But it's not an accepted form of showing spirit, right? Or presenting spirit. But you can still go and experience these things. So this is myself and my friend Sarah. We actually did a seance in Binghamton. There's gosh, I'm blanking on the name. I'm so sorry, but it's a Phelps Mansion in Binghamton, New York. And they had a medium there. She is, a practicing spirit medium, but she also is very enmeshed in the history of spiritualism, and she recreates these types of seances, right? And it's great, right? Because she's showing the chicanery that could kind of go on in these situations, right? The fraud that could go on, while also being a serious spirit medium, right? And that is one thing that a lot of spirit mediums today and then would say, that just because something like the spirit, the ectoplasm or whatever was going on, it didn't necessarily mean that the person that was doing it was not a medium. It's just that they had to somehow show, somehow show people, unbelievers, right, that this was happening. So, anywho, but yeah, that was a fun night. So Phelps, I think it's dead. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Phelps Museum in Binghamton. So that is my talk. Thank you for coming. I am happy to sign books. I'm also happy if we have time, Ryan. I don't know. I know I kind of droned on along, but if y'all have questions, I am happy to discuss or talk about your experiences in Lilydale if you want to, or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, Ryan, what kind of.
I mean, if anybody has any questions, I think if they want to share stories, they can kind of do that afterwards. But if anybody has any questions that they need answered, we can take a couple.
I got one.
So here and here.
I had a medium there. Her name was Sherry Lee,
Oh.
and I'm not sure if she's still there or not, because it's been a bunch of years since I've been there. Some friends of ours wanted to go,
Yeah.
so one day we went. Stood in line waiting. We're going up the driveway there, and there was a bunch of houses to the right, and there was a lady sitting there on the porch. And she waved at me, so I rolled down my window, "Hey, how are you?" Because we're in line going up, paying for 4 of us in the car. It was like $100 or whatever it was. Anyway, she says, "I'll talk to you later," and I says, "Okay," we went. So then we're there for the day. We had the lunch. We went all over to the gift shop. We did the whole thing, right? They went to their mediums, and I didn't have one, but I loved it there. It was a nice little place, right? Everybody treated us good. On the way back, I said, "Look, I said, stop at that house." Everybody's got, no. And I said, "No, really, I stopped at the house." So we stopped at the house, and I walked up to the porch. Now, my favorite number is 7. Okay, even though I was born on Friday the 13th, my number is 7. And when I bet 7, I win.
Fair.
Okay, that's just something I had, right? Even my license plate, everything I do. I drink Jack Daniels, which is number 7. All that crap about number 7 that everybody knows about, that's me, right, Paulie?
Yep.
So, anyways, I walk up there and I look, isn't it number 7 house? And I'm going, holy cats, it's number 7 house. So I knock on the door, no one's in there, it's all in the dark, and I'm knocking. No one comes to the door, and I look over at the table, and her cards are there. So I go over there and I pick up one of her cards. Sherry Lee. SHRIELEE. I gotta stand for this. My wife's name is Sherry Lee. SHRIELEE. And I said, I gotta get a hold of this lady. So I went to craziness trying to get a hold of her. I called her, everything. She was on her way to Geneseo or something for some seance. I don't know what it was. She goes, I'll be seeing you soon. I'll be talking to you. You call me tonight at 6 o'clock. So I call her. She says, I want you to get some papers out and a pen. We're going to be talking for a long time. She says, no problem. And I said, all right. So she is also an artist, and she draws things. So she says, I got this big frame. I'm going to be drawing while I'm talking to you for colors. She named different colors, meant different things. She says, and all of a sudden, she's drawing this, and she draws a sword. And she says to me, there's a sword. I'm drawing a sword. Does that mean anything to you? And I said, well, let me see. I've been in martial arts 40 years. I probably got about 100 samurai swords. Yeah, that means something to me, right? So she says, I'll keep on drawing, you keep on talking. So she went out almost 5 years from that date. And she said to me, oh no, I see black. And I said, what are you telling me? 5 years from now I'm going to die? She goes, I don't know what it is. But she says, I'm very, very sorry. She was like almost crying that she couldn't see beyond there because it was all black, right? So when I met this lady, it was an unbelievable day for me, meeting her, talking to her, texting to her, finding all that stuff out. So that's why I'm here, really. When I heard Lilydale, I'm like, come on, I gotta go see what's going on over here. So the years passed, and when I talked to people at work about it, they would laugh. Hey, Dennis, you got about a year left, you're gonna die, right? And I'm like, oh my God, right? So guess what? We came to that year, and nothing happened except one thing. I've had German Shepherd dogs all my life, but I never had a black one. I found a lady that raised black German Shepherds, and I got my black German Shepherd, right? So I sit there and I look at this dog all the time, which is a very, very smart dog. And the communication between me and this animal is unbelievable, but there's the dark. That was the dark she saw. It wasn't that I was going to die. She says, this fantastic thing was going to happen to you when you've looked your whole life for something and now all of a sudden you got it. So that's my story. So I'll take a couple books. And I'm out of here. As long as you sign them, I'm out of here. You know the craziest thing about this whole thing? Is that one of my good friends is recording right now.
Nice.
So I will say though, that's an interesting story because I was like, interesting, because normally spirit mediums will not deliver bad news. Like it's just kind of against the creed, right? Like, so I was like, where is this guy going? So it's interesting, right, that it wasn't bad news, right? Like you are basically gifted this spirit animal, right? Even if they might see something, right? Like it's the mediumship is for good, right? It's the good of all. It's giving people blessing and hope, right? So it's not like movies where you'll go and it's like, oh, the death tarot card, like that's the end of the world. It's like that's not
it was about 2 months later,
Actually, she was
and I got this package in the mail.
Okay, sorry, yeah.
And it was as big as this frame. And guess what it was?
Her picture.
It was her picture that
Oh,
she
wow.
painted on. So I got it in a nice big frame in the wall of my bedroom. I'm like, that's it. And all the dates, she had all the dates on the years there too, but it ended at a certain date. And there's the samurai sword, all with the different colors meaning different things.
That's good.
Material,
Yeah.
so that when I look at that, I know what I'm looking at. And I understand that.
Story. Wow.
Okay?
Thank you.
I just wanted people to know there is a library there. I attempted like 30 years ago to use it as a resource, and they were not the woman was not welcoming to me. So I'll just talk to you in private over that one.
Yeah, so it is called the Marion Skidmore Library. Where's my picture of Marion Skidmore? She actually started the collection, and a lot of the like grounds work, the kind of landscaping and everything is all because of Marion Skidmore. So yeah, there is the library. I will say most of the books that are in there are like second editions and things that you could probably get anywhere. The real kind of primary source documents are either locked in the office or Ron has them in the library. I mean in the museum. Yeah.
You mentioned a couple times burned over district.
Oh, yes,
What is
thank
that?
you, and I'm sorry, and I said that, and then I was like, oh my gosh, I never explained it. So the burned over district is this area of western New York where all these little dots are, right here.
All of that.
So like the blue dots are the Mormons, and the purple dots are the Millerites, and the Fourierists, and the anti-slavery churches, and then the revivals, right? The revivals being, these kind of revival meetings. And so the burnt over district is, this area is alive with the fires of revival. It is burned over with the fires of revival. So Finney actually came up with the term, and he was kind of using it derisively, like not nice, like, oh my gosh, these people are just crazy for religion, right? But it stuck, right? And people really kind of embraced it. It was like, yeah, because it is. It's like all these fires of like Protestant adjacent Christianity, along with a very strong abolitionist movement, right? Anti-slavery movement, and the rise of women's rights.
All at the same time.
All at the same time, right? So it's burned over with the fires of reform, the fires of revival. Yeah, thank you because I did skip over that.
Great. Well, thank you again, Dr. Masarik. Thank you, everybody. We do have one more copy left here of Spiritualism Place. We also have some copies of her other book, Sentimental State. I know she'll be happy to sign anything. If you do grab one, please take it up to the gift shop, and you can pay for it there. Just a quick update on everything coming up. We have another guest speaker next Wednesday, the 15th, Derek Pratt from the Erie Canal Museum.
Okay.
We'll be talking about the conception of the Erie Canal, so how it all gets started.
Wow.
Then if you want more spiritualists, you can come to our West Side Ghost Story Talk on the 16th and learn about a bunch of the spiritualists that were here in Batavia. But if you want to do the walk, the next one is Friday the 17th. We still have a few spots at 7:30, and then we have our final walk, which is the West Side Walk. Also talks about spiritualists. They're everywhere. On the 24th at 7:30. Yes, Mary?
Java is the free event for everybody.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I was just getting there. And then our last Java with Joe of the year is Thursday the 23rd at 9 a.m. And Claudia Newstein of the Genesee County Forest will be here to talk about the history of it, as Genesee County Forest is the oldest in New York State. So a lot of history there. So thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Elizabeth, for coming to talk, and we hope to see you again.
Thank you.